Good afternoon. I think we should get started as we are past our starting time. So welcome. Glad to see that there are some persistent soul in the audience still this late afternoon. Welcome to this side event on the future Barents Sea ecosystem, adapting and managing for 2050 and beyond. My name is Anita Evenset. I'm a director for the environmental department in Aquaplan Niva here in Tromsø, and I will moderate this event. This side event is hosted by the Nansen Legacy Project, and for those of you who are not familiar with the project, I can tell you that it is a very comprehensive and holistic research project that has been run since 2018 and will end in 2024. It has included a large team of researchers from many different scientific disciplines. And as we are now approaching the end, I think it's very well-founded to say that this has been a very successful project. It has included more than 280 researchers, students, and technicians from 10 different research institutions. And so far, more than 200 scientific publications has been produced, and more will come in the years that follows the project. If you are interested in learning more about the project, you will find some fact sheets to the left of the door, or you can scan the QR codes there and get the fact sheet electronically. So in this event, we will start with 3 presentations from research, management, and industry actors. And after the presentations, we will have a discussion. So if you have questions, please save them for the discussion after the presentations. And our first presenter will be Marius Aartun, and he's a researcher at the University of Bergen and a research leader at the Bjerknes Center for Climate Research. He has been an active participant in the Nansen Legacy Project, where he has led the research focus and synthesis task force on the future Barents Sea. And today he will talk about the future Barents Sea, a synthesis of physical, ecological, and biogeochemical changes towards 2050 and 2100. And Marius was not able to come to Tromsø today, so he will present digitally. And I see we have Marius on the screen already, so the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I saw that you saw me. Can you hear me okay as well?
Yes.
Great.
Yes, we can hear you.
And so I was told that my presentation was going to be uploaded. Is that still correct, or am I sharing my screen?
If you can share your screen, it's best, because then you can control your changes.
Sure, I'll do that. Then the moderator needs to allow me to do so. Sorry. I'm not allowed to share my screen.
Okay. So now you have it.
I have it, and you have to say when to change.
Okay, so we can see your presentation now, but you have to tell us next slide when you want us to change.
Okay, sure, I'll do that. Let's see if I can because I only see myself, so it would be nice to see not myself, but my slides. But I can, as long as you see myself, there we go, perfect, thank you. Okay, so thank you for the introduction. I've been leading this work package in the Nansen Legacy about the future Barents Sea, and so the last activity, or the activity that we've been doing for the last 6 months or so is trying to synthesize what we know about the future Barents Sea, both in terms of physical, ecological, and biogeochemical changes, both towards 2050 and also towards 2100. So that's what I'm going to present now. So this is on behalf of myself and also a large number of scientists within the Nansen legacy. So I just call them the Nansen legacy synthesis team, so I don't forget anyone. But I hope that someone is in the room and also can join the discussion afterwards if needed. So yeah, next slide, please. So yeah, so I'd like to start out very, very broad, so as broad as we can get. So this is a map of global temperature increase in the ocean expected towards the end of the century. And the main take-home message here is that you see that it's redder towards the Arctic than in the global ocean, meaning that you expect a larger degree of warming in the high latitudes than the rest of the world towards the end of the century. And then you see on the figure to the right, that's a zoom in of the Arctic, and you see that the largest warming expected within the Arctic is in the Barents Sea. So the Barents Sea is definitely a hot spot of global climate change, both at present and in the future. Next slide, please. This is also sort of manifested in sea ice changes. So what I'm showing you here is the observed sea ice loss over the last 4 decades or so, since 1979, since we have satellite observations. So we know that the summer sea ice is disappearing quite rapidly throughout the Arctic. That's more of a sort of central Arctic feature because, as you're probably well aware of, the Barents Sea doesn't have much sea ice in summer. But if you then look at the winter sea ice cover over the last 4 decades, you see that the largest sort of sea ice retreat or sea ice loss has occurred in the Barents Sea. So again, pointing towards the Barents Sea as a hotspot of ongoing climate change. Next slide, please. And one very sort of simple way of thinking about this is sort of that the Barents Sea has been sort of undergoing a transition from what used to be, a cold Arctic climate state toward more of a warm Atlantic climate state. So more resembling that, further south. So this is what has been termed an Atlantification of the Barents Sea. So this first few slides is just to put these sort of the recent or ongoing change in the Barents Sea into perspective. Next slide. So as the title of my talk alluded to, so what I want to do now is to sort of look into the glass ball and just see if we can, what do we know, what can we say about the future Barents Sea? What do we expect the changes in the Barents Sea climate system to be towards 2050 and 2100. Next, please. But first, I want to start out with maybe explaining shortly how do we look into the future. So we don't have observations, of course, so we have different tools. So this is one major tool that we have used and also others are using. So that's the climate models that go into the IPCC report. So every time there's an IPCC report, there's what is called a coupled model intercomparison project, or CMIP, where many different climate centers throughout the world, including Norway, run their climate model with a certain set of scenarios. And these scenarios are divided into what we call SSPs, or shared socioeconomic pathways, which you can simply look at it as being from quite optimistic scenarios where you have a green transition towards more pessimistic scenarios where you continue to burn fossil fuels, et cetera, et cetera. So to the figure to the right, you just see 3 sort of commonly used scenarios, and then sort of as a function of global surface temperature change towards 2100. So you see that if you have, let's call it an optimistic scenario with a green transition, that's the blue line, and then you have a green line, which is sort of a middle of the road scenario, sort of more resembling a 2-degree warming scenario or a Paris Agreement, and then you have a quite pessimistic scenario and a high degree of global change towards 2100. And so in the results that I'm going to show you, we've chosen to look at the pessimistic scenario and the middle of the road scenario. And then you can discuss among yourselves whether you think, the blue line is a realistic scenario or not, given the way that, we're doing right now. Next slide, please. Also, like I said, this is not just physics. So the CMIP models gives us insight into physical changes, so ocean temperature, currents, atmospheric temperature changes, etc., and also biogeochemical changes. But in this synthesis, we've also looked into ecosystem changes, and for that we need to use other tools than CMIP models, or we can use CMIP models as sort of physical forcing, and then use or put that physical forcing into ecosystem models that we have at hand. So for instance, the NOBA Atlantis model. So that will then give you information of ecosystem changes also towards 2050 and 2100. And I have to say that, right away, as a, spoiler alert, that I'm not an ecosystem scientist. So any detailed questions or, comments or discussion points afterwards on how an ecosystem model works, I will leave to more skilled people in the room. Next slide, please. Okay, so now I'm just going to run quite quickly through some of the results that we've got. So I'm going to start with the physical side of the Barents Sea, and what I didn't maybe say is that for this synthesis work, there are many different climate models out there, so you can look at the results. And for this kind of work, we've used around 25 different models, and the results that I'm showing you here is just it's the average, and we'll get back to a little bit of uncertainty afterwards. So this is results towards 2050, where you see not unexpectedly that sea ice coverage, or we have less sea ice in the Barents Sea. You have quite a strong sort of warming of the atmospheric temperatures. The two different thermometers include or indicates the southern and the northern Barents Sea. You see that a larger degree of warming in the northern Barents Sea. Sea surface temperature changes as well, a few degrees of warming, and then sort of contrasting changes in the south and north of stratification. So that's like the mixed layer depth in the oceans, which will decrease in the south and then will increase in the north as you have the sea ice retreats and you have more mixing of the upper water column. And stratification changes is of course important to ecosystem changes, for instance. We see increased primary production in the northern Barents Sea, and we also see a decreases in pH, so increased level of ocean acidification. For fish, I can't really see what's on the slide, but so for fish, that one of the main findings that we see is that you see a shift in the distribution of fish biogeography. So that fish stocks move in general sort of northeastwards with a warming ocean and a retreating sea ice edge. You also see changes in sort of fish abundance and stock sizes, and also in sort of the spawning area of major fish species. And then as a sort of a fourth thing, so we have, like I said, we have the climate models that we can look at, and we have ecosystem models. But then we also wanted to say something about changes in sort of what do we expect in terms of human impact and sort of based on or in line with what we see in changes in physical drivers and ecosystems. So we also made statements, or we made our own sort of projections on increased pollutants, shipping, light availability, etc. So as was mentioned, like if you want to have a closer look at these very nice figures, I have to say, you can also have a look at the fact sheet, which was at the back of the room, if I understood it correctly. Next, please. Yes. Also, what I didn't say about the previous slide is that was for the figures that I showed you was for the sort of medium emission scenario. But one interesting thing, or one key finding, is that sort of regardless of emission scenarios, so by 2050 there are hardly any differences. So, the change in the Barents Sea, the future change in the Barents Sea by 2050 is pretty much set regardless of changes in emissions. That is, however, not the case if you look for 2100. So then you start to see pretty large changes dependent on whether you go for a middle of the road Paris Agreement scenario or whether you go for a high emission scenario. So just so this is again a figure from the fact sheet. So where one road sort of follows the high emission scenario, so the SSP 585, and another road follows the SSP 245. And you see, for instance, in the first figure, which shows ocean and atmospheric temperatures for the southern and northern Barents Sea, that there's very large differences, for instance, in air temperature. So for a high emission scenario by 2100, you could have an atmospheric sort of temperature increase by over 12 degrees, which is quite substantial, of course. Next, please. So then I also wanted to touch a little bit upon uncertainty. Like I said, the results that were on the previous slides are where you take lots of different models and then you average them. And they do agree on quite a lot in terms of the sign of the change. So whether it's going to be warmer or colder or more or less sea ice, they all agree on that. But they different models, they do different thing in terms of how much sea ice they lose. But the uncertainty towards 2050 and 2100 that's a result of both different kinds of models. So in this figure I'm showing you here, that's the different models is like the shading in the background. So you see that shading is quite large. But then you also have, of course, uncertainty dependent on what scenario you choose. So that's again the different SSPs. So whether you choose a high emission or a low emission scenario. So that's of course not possible to know right now which scenario we will follow. And then there's also a third source of uncertainty, which is internal variability, which is just basically natural variability in the climate system. Next, please. So just wanted to elaborate, or the previous one. There we go. Yeah. So I just wanted to elaborate 2 seconds on natural variability and what this means for projections towards 2050 and 2100. So you can say that you know that by 2100 or 2050 that the sea ice in the Barents Sea is going to retreat. But if you look at the next 10 years or so, or next 5 years or so, there's so much variability in the system that then the sea ice edge could move either southwards or northwards. So you could have increased sea ice cover from 1 year to the next, which will compensate for a decade of trend. And that's what we've seen over the last decade in the Barents Sea. So next slide, please. So if you look at observed sea ice concentration over the last decade, you actually see that there's been a slight increase in sea ice cover in the Barents Sea, which is quite counterintuitive if you think of a global warming scenario. So the key message here is that if you're going to plan either that's fishery management or any other kind of management for the Barents Sea over the next 10 years, that's quite a different exercise than planning for the next 50 years, where you are sort of more on this sort of climate projection timescale. So I think that was my last point, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Marius, for a very nice, although somewhat scary presentation. You will stay with us until the discussion in the end. So I think we just move on to our next speaker, who's a representative of Fisheries Management, Per Sandberg, who holds a position as a specialist advisor at the environmental section in the Norwegian Directorate of Fisheries. He's an economist specializing in fishery economics with a master from the University of Bergen and a PhD from the Norwegian School of Economics and Business Administration. And Per has held various positions at the Directorate of Fisheries, including head of its statistics department from 2005 to 2020, and Director General of Fisheries in 2020 till 2021. And he's also a Norwegian delegate to ICES. And today he will present management of fisheries under climate change.
Thank you. It's nice to be here after a quite fascinating flight from Bergen and up here. The theme for this side event, the future Barents Sea ecosystem adapting and managing for 2050, is quite ambitious. Planning how we will manage fisheries 25 years from now is not something that we do regularly in the Directorate of Fisheries, but the challenges ahead with climate change, protecting marine biodiversity, doing the right trade-off between environmental, economic, and social sustainability criteria to achieve a sustainable development makes it relevant to form long-term perspectives. Marius from the Bjerknes Center has shown us that by 2050, due to a changing climate, we can expect changes both in the Barents Sea and in its resources. We must expect higher variability in temperature, distribution of fish stocks, and their productivity. But how can we manage fisheries in such a situation? I will come back to this question, but first steal a minute of your time to tell you about my employer. I work in the Directorate of Fisheries. We are headed down in the southwest coast of Norway, in Bergen. This is an advisory and regulatory body under the Ministry of Fisheries. And our area of operation is management of aquaculture, fisheries, and coastal zone management. The main objective for the Directorate of Fisheries you can read here: we shall promote profitable economic activity through sustainable and user-oriented management of marine resources and marine environment. But back to my topic of my short intervention, management of fisheries under climate change, and let me start with the word management. Why should we manage fisheries at all? What are our goals? And which tools do we have for managing it? This figure here is, let's see now if it comes up. There you are. Shows some of the essentials of how we manage. And the figure is drawn from a FAO article, and it shows some dynamics in an unregulated fishery. And it's a figure that is consisting of both biological parameters and economic parameters. The horizontal axis here measures effort, but think of it as number of fishing vessels or size of fishing vessels. The vertical axis measures income and costs in the fishery. And the dome-shaped bell measures income when you increase the number of fishing vessels, whereas the straight line tells you something about the total cost when you do the same thing. If you're down at the very left-hand side where it's signaled with 0, you have this is a fishery which has not been exploited, and we have no vessels, we have no income, and we have no costs. But if income is higher than costs, somebody will start fishing, and additional fishing vessels will join, as long as there is a profit to be reaped. If we look then at this bell-shaped curve marked with total revenue TR, this will increase as more vessels participate, but only up to a point where the fish stock provides maximum sustainable yield. Further increase in fishing effort will lead to overexploitation of the fish stock, and the sustainable catch will decrease. However, in an unregulated fishery, more vessels are expected to participate if income is higher than costs, and the figure shows that this will be the situation until the two curves cross. But at that point, there will be no more profit to be reaped from the fishery, and the fish stock will be overexploited. So as fisheries managers, we would like to do this better by reducing the number of fishing vessels and the annual volume of catches. And the two indicators we are targeting is the following. Is the stock at a level which produces maximum sustainable yield? And is the fishing effort at a level which produces maximum economic yield? The tools we have to make the situation better but can be categorized in three. We can regulate the size of the fishing fleet, often called input regulation. We can regulate the annual volume of the catch, often called output regulation. And we can regulate to avoid the catch of juvenile fish, often called technical regulation. So, what have we achieved by managing fisheries with these tools for the last 30, 40 years? The large fish stocks exploited by Norwegian fishermen is in a far better state than they were 30 or 40 years ago. There are, of course, variations. Some fish stocks have increased more than others, and right now we experience a downward trend in our most important cod stock. And there will also be natural variability causing fluctuations in the fish stock that would do something about the sustainable yield. If I should use this figure, and I would say that we are somewhere where the red arrow points. The overall yield from our combined fisheries is pretty good, and we have a fishery with a profitability far higher than what can be seen in industries that are not exploiting such a resource. So, what are the signals for the future? The signals show that we must expect the environment of the Barents Sea to change as we look ahead to 2050, but it also tells us that the future is uncertain. As fishery managers, uncertainty is something we are used to live with. But the uncertainty that is signaled here is much larger than what we are used to live with, and it indicates a regime shift where the productivity of the fish stocks may change. Previously, I mentioned the three group of tools that we use to manage fisheries: regulating the size of the fleet, the volume of the catches, and technical regulations. And regulating the size of the fleet, and to a large extent technical regulation, is something we deal with domestically within Norway. But as the fish stocks Norwegian fishermen exploit generally have a distribution far beyond Norwegian waters, the question of regulating the volume of catch is solved through international cooperation. This is a situation which is highly likely to exist also in 2050 and beyond. So let me use a minute on that cooperation. This map shows the Norwegian waters, often mentioned to be 6 times larger than the Norwegian land area. As the fish stock have a distribution beyond these waters, there is a need for international cooperation to establish the total allowable catch each year. And the decision is based on scientific advice, and broadly, the system is like this. First and foremost, research vessels from neighboring countries monitor the stocks. Then, the International Council for the Exploration of the Seas, ICS, have established working groups where relevant scientists come together with all their data and model the size of the stock. At the best then, those nations that share a fish stock have agreed upon a long-term management plan, which establishes how the annual total catch should be set. When this is the case, ICS use the input from scientists, stock assessment, together with the plans to provide an advice for how much to fish. But when no long-term management plan exists, ICS provides advice according to the criteria maximum sustainable yield. Again, looking ahead 25 years in time to 2050, how should we be able to find a sustainable level of catch in the fishery when we have learned that climate change the marine environment in the Barents Sea, and with that, the productivity of the fish stock? If, for example, the productivity of the major fish stocks in the area falls, we may need to change the long-term management plans, and we may need to reduce the annual total allowable catches. Or for some other fish stocks, the situation may be reverse. There will be a possibility for higher productivity and annual catches. And even in the long run, environmental sustainability is a necessary condition for achieving both economic and social sustainability. There will be trade-offs in the short run. These are not quite straightforward questions to answer. If we in addition take into account that seafood from the fisheries in general has a lower carbon footprint than many other food produced on land, to mitigate climate change, it's probably a good idea to harvest as much fish as possible, of course within sustainable levels. I mention this because it will be an argument when we are faced with uncertain data about changes in the productivity of fish stocks and possible need to amend long-term management plans and total allowable catch. So I am returning to the title of my intervention: how do we manage fisheries under climate change? I think there are 4 areas where we need to keep an open eye. The first one is related to the importance of ensuring solid knowledge and monitoring data. We are lucky enough to have a system with routinely updated information about the marine environment in our waters through the Norwegian management plans. And the oldest one is from the Barents Sea. These management plans cover a wide area of information, and they are vital for signaling changes in the environment and possible regime shifts. In addition, we have ecosystem overviews from ICS, also routinely updated. The management plans and ICS advisory overviews are cross-sectoral. They discuss not only fisheries, but changes in environment and the key anthropogenic drivers behind, be it climate, pollution, etc. When we are back to the more narrow topic of fisheries management, we are back to one sector. And there we rely on data from the Institute of Marine Research and ICS. We need constantly updated data that can tell us something about the productivity of the fish stocks. And here we are at a very crucial point in my mind regarding fisheries management under climate change. Assessment of a fish stock and prognosis for its productivity is usually based on historical data. When faced with climate change that may have consequences for how the fish stock will develop, when will this information be used in stock assessment? Until new data replaces historical data, the signals of climate change will not, or maybe too slow, affect stock assessment that will spur a change in management. The second is that we need to do scenario testing to better understand how we should manage fisheries if productivity changes radically. The third is a need for international cooperation. When the fish stocks are shared with other countries, it's fundamental that there is an international agreement upon both data collection, use of models, and targeted management actions. And the fourth spans the perspective even further. We are now in a situation where not only fish stocks shall be managed sustainably, there is also a need to address the effect from fisheries on climate change, as well as marine biodiversity, and what this may have of consequences for the fisheries. I will come to a close, but just share one example here of how one can use management strategy evaluations to test whether current management plans are robust to large changes in productivity. The example is drawn from an internal working paper at the Institute of Marine Research by John Trokta, Fabian Zimmermann, and Carsten Wingel. The case they used was shrimp in the Barents Sea. Here they tested a long-term management plan that was found to be sustainable. The figure to the right has 3 panels. The one at the top shows development of the biomass or stock of shrimp, the green line, from approximately 1970 and to beyond 2050. It's measured against the dotted horizontal line, which is the biomass level producing maximum sustainable yield. The panel in the middle shows the development of catch, again against the green zone, measured against the dotted horizontal line that tells the catch from a stock managed at MSY level. And the third panel shows the development of fishing mortality measured against fishing mortality that produces MSY. Here, they modeled a cut in productivity by reducing the carrying capacity in the system with 50% in the middle of the forecast period. I believe this kind of scenario testing should be done to prepare us as fishery managers about the consequences that could arise if productivity of fish stocks changes. We will then be better prepared when ICS tells us about a regime shift in the ocean. So, in the Directorate of Fisheries, we see fisheries as a part of the solution for a green and sustainable future. Seafood from fisheries have a generally low carbon footprint, and it's healthy to eat. But we must ensure that emission of greenhouse gases are kept at a minimum, that we avoid fishing practices that threatens marine biodiversity, and that we have the knowledge to amend regulation when climate change indicates that we should do so. With that, I come to a close, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Per, for a very interesting presentation. I understand fisheries management is complicated, and it's certainly not getting any easier when we know that the future is quite uncertain. So lots of challenges ahead. And that's the same also for the fishing fleet. And our last speaker in the side event is Benedicte Nilsen from Norges Råfisklag. She is a fishery economist with decades of experience from various parts of the fishing industry. She has been employed by Norges Råfisklag since 2005, and she currently holds a position as public relation manager. And she will talk about warming of the Barents Sea. How will it impact fisheries?
Thank you. I'm glad to see that there are some of you still holding out. It's getting late in the day. As I said on the slide here, seafood is one of Norway's major exports, and it has a proud history and will have a fantastic future if we do things right. So I'm really happy to be here, and I thank you for giving me the possibility to share some insights into the wild fish industry. And I will start with a short film. Sorry for the Norwegian texting. Oh. There's no sound on it? Well, it doesn't really matter. I think I'll just skip it. So about Norwegian Fishermen's Sales Organization, which is the translation of Norges Råfisklag. We are a cooperative founded in 1938, and we were founded due to the social and economic injustice that fishermen had to live with in those times. And so I think the various aspects of sustainability is really part of our DNA as an organization with that foundation. The idea of having fisheries which are not ecosystem-based it's sort of unthinkable. And we handle the first-hand sales between the fishermen and the first-hand buyers, and we also guarantee the fishermen payment, and we provide lots of data to the Directorate of Fisheries so they can keep track of how much of the quota has been fished at all times. So we share data every second, which is a good thing. Just to give you an insight in how much this means for the northern Norwegian economy, last year the total value of the catch from all the fishermen delivering catch in our part of the world was more than 17 billion Norwegian kroner. So it's a big industry in our part of the world. And it's the highest value ever in our area. And the last 10 years have each year provided the highest value ever for Norwegian fishermen. So even now when fish stocks are going down, the prices have compensated for the downwards volumes. To follow up a little bit on what Per said in his presentation, I think our success as a nation in maintaining a high yield from our fish stocks comes from a fairly complex but well-run system, which has developed over decades. We have a long-term cooperation with Russia on fisheries management. Our main species are shared, so the joint management simply must work. Our scientists are world-class. We are lucky enough to have politicians who almost always listen to what the scientists say. We have really knowledgeable bureaucrats who divide the quota between the different groups of fishermen. And we have fishermen who has a deep felt understanding of the need to have a management system. They know that they can sort of take down any fish stock if they really put their minds to it, and they don't want to do that. And we have the structure of the sales organizations, as we are, who help the authorities in gathering and verifying catch data in fisheries versus quotas. And we have competent fish buyers who export seafood to more than 140 countries around the world. We export 95% of all the landings in Norway. And so we have also a system of control and reactions that seem reasonable for the most part. So I will say that it's a system developed step by step over decades, but this wheel, it keeps turning, and it gives us the rate of success I think that we have today. Oh. Den vill ikke. It doesn't change the slide. Oh, there we go. Whee! So how does it work in practice? This is, if you drive your car from there to the Russian border, it's more or less 1,800 kilometers. And this is not all of Råfisklagets area, just to give you an image of the distances. We have a very sparsely populated area that we work in, but it is populated and it's alive and it's doing quite well actually. So this is a result of nature-giving conditions, but also during decades a lot of political will to keep people living also on the outskirts of in the small communities. The map shows all the fishing plants in the north of Norway where thousands of fishermen can land their catch. This decentralized structure means that small boats can fish and deliver the catch fresh close to their home. Many fishing communities along the Norwegian coast are dependent on their local fishermen and local factories. Some also depend on fishermen who come from far away to participate in the seasonal fisheries. And the other factor is the fishing fleet. It's quite diversified. We have almost 4,000 professional fishing vessels, but almost 3,000 of them are less than 11 meters long, so small coastal vessels, often employing 1 or 2 persons. We have around 100 really deep sea-going vessels who often freeze their catch on board, but the majority in numbers are the coastal fleet. Most fishermen earn part of the value of the catch. So if they make good money, each fisherman also earn good money. This is a good incentive to wanting to be a fisherman and staying a fisherman, and also to be to have a good standard of living, contributing by paying taxes and contributing in your local community. So for a fun fact, in 1946 there were approximately 120,000 fishermen in Norway. Today, more or less 11,000, between 10 and 11,000. They do bring more fish out of the sea than in 1946. And the difference in standard of living compared to then is unbelievable compared to 1946. Really high-tech, most of the vessels, and the development in gear technology, fish finding technology, catch technology, everything is, of course, the explanation on how you can reduce from 120,000 to 11,000 without decreasing the volumes caught. Total allowable catch. This is, I'm not going to spend a lot of time doing this, but it's to show that we are used to variations. In 1990, I think we had the all-time low for cod quota with 160,000 tons. One is fallen out. In 2013, we had more than 1 million tons. So extreme variation. The last few years, it's been going down a bit. And of course, this is worrying for the fishermen. And fisheries is the backbone of the economy in so many small communities. So a further fall in quota is dramatic. So the fishermen ask themselves, has the quotas been set too high earlier, or is it climate change or changes in the ecosystems that is the explanation for the fall? But that's sort of just to show that variations are also perceived as normal. And we have an extreme seasonal fisheries for the fresh cod. So 80% of the Norwegian cod quota is landed during the first 4 months of the year. Other species have also seasonal peaks, but not as typical as these. Nature has decided that the cod approaches the coast to spawn, and thus making it available for the small coastal fishing fleet. They can land the catch super fresh, and it goes into very many diverse products into the markets. And this is a bit complicated, but in the light of what we've heard earlier today about already seeing some tendencies of change due to maybe to ecosystem or climate change. On the far right-hand corner, it shows that, how should I put it? Traditionally, the cod season takes place, and this is the winter season only. Traditionally, the cod season takes place in Lofoten and Vesterålen area. Finnmark, but now in the recent years, Finnmark has become more and more important. They have a larger and larger portion of the total landings, and this is not. This we haven't seen in as far back as we have statistics. So it's a possible warning, and it coincides with what And the Nansen legacy has shown that warmer seas will bring the fish further north and further east. And the fishermen, they ask themselves, is it the food supply that's changing? Is somebody eating the small cod? Is the herring and mackerel that have migrated further north than they have in many years? You know, everything plays together, and there's a lot of question. I think all the fishermen agree that we need more research, both in climate and by the Marine Institute just on the cod stocks, or the fish stocks. When we had this huge spawning stock in 2013, it's fair to believe that it comes from the first red circle from 2007. Those are 3-year-old cod, so they were born in 2004, and they turned out to be a huge success. Very many of the cod eggs turned out to be not only tiny cod, but also huge cod. And they've been present in the catch statistics for a long time. And normally they enter the catch statistics when they are like 5 to 7 years old and up and older. But those and they should be spawning when they are from 6-7 years old. But we see that there hasn't been really a good success for the spawning. Maybe 2014, we should start seeing them now really entering the catch. We are not really seeing it. So this is the kind of statistics that the fishermen are really interested in, and they want to know more. So we hope that the successful 3-year-olds in 2018, 17 and 18, that it will bring, they will come into the fisheries in a couple of years' time, and the downward curve for the total allowable catch will increase again. But we'll see. We are not the deciding factor, but we are very interested in what's going to happen and how this is read. To sum up, fishermen are both expectant and apprehensive about the changes that we maybe see some tendencies for at the moment. They are seeing threats and possibility if the climate of the sea changes. But vessels are movable. They have engines and propellers, so they can get to the fish, provided that the fish stocks remain strong, just in a different place. So initially, changes are much more threatening for the land-based industry that normally buys the fish from the fishermen. They are literally stuck on land, so they cannot move easily. If Lofoten turns out to be less interesting than it has been the last 100 years, it will have a big impact on the coastal communities in that area. So that said, the industry has over decades shown that they are extremely resilient and adaptable, and so I wouldn't write them off just now, but that's sort of in the short term, more critical than the fish stocks changing where they can be easily available for the fishing fleet. So I think that a lot of the fishermen feel like this guy who ended up stranded on a small piece of rock, and his boat and he was really sitting still in his seat. It's almost impossible. His keel is 20 centimeters wide. So I think he felt he was balancing on a knife's edge, and I think we are all in the same boat. It might be smart to remain calm and act in a very balanced way. Thank you.
Thank you, Benedicte. Now I think we will have our presenters up on the floor here, and maybe we could have Marius on the screen. And now there is time for questions, so I will open for questions from the audience, and we can start with that. Yes, please.
I was wondering if you are, or
Please get
sorry,
the mic.
I was wondering if you are, like, gathering some data on restaurant materials and their value. Restaurant materials. Restaurantstoff. Yeah, and their value into your work.
Yeah, we are we are gathering both the quantity and the value of all material that is brought on land. So we have the information about that. Concerning this question of how to use that material when we are faced with climate change, we have not been looking at. Yeah, but thank you.
Any more questions from the audience? Yes, please.
Hi, thank you for great presentations. My name is Ina Helene Alkvist. I'm from Sintef Ocean. So I just had a question. Maybe all of you could answer, but it's specifically for Benedicte. Because you said that as of right now, we don't necessarily need to be too scared for keeping lights on in the coastal communities because the fishers can move towards where the fish moves. But I would argue that maybe I wouldn't be too calm about that, because if you look at the governance policies coming with more focus on the green transition, with higher prices for CO2, and also just the aspect of the ethical part, when should we travel further? Have you any thoughts on that?
I think that, as I said, the physical fact is that the vessels can move while the fishing industry is stuck on land. I do also know that some of the fishermen are scared that, how much more fuel do we have to use? How much further do we have to go from our home village? Is my boat suited to go much further away? So they are not looking forward to it, but it's sort of keeping calm and see how it goes. But I think that's one of the strong sides of the coastal fleet, which is quite important and lands 65% or so of all the what's landed in the north. One of the strengths is that they are day boats. They can go very short distances, so they don't use a lot of fuel to catch their whatever the quota is.
I think we are in a way now at a situation, at least in management. I mean, we have been working with managing fish stocks at a sustainable level for many decades, and by and large, we have done a lot of things quite okay, together with the Fishermen's Union and also with the neighboring countries and so on. And we have developed long-term management plans. So we can say that we are in a position where if you only look at the fish stock, they go up and down, but by and large, it's quite good. I think we now are in a situation where when we take into account climate change, we need to turn all stones to see how we can manage fisheries to reduce the emission of climate gases. And one element would be, I think, that we need at least to have very strong fish stocks, because if you have strong fish stocks, you will, in the long term, have quite high catch per unit effort. And then you will also have lower emission of gas per unit of catch. So that is one element. But there's also the problem of access. Where do you... we have regulations that prohibits access to some areas for some fishing vessels, and maybe we have to look at that. But then again, other problems turns up, like there may be too many fishing vessels in one area and so on. Marius, would you comment this?
Yeah, sure. I can. So I can't really comment much on fisheries or sort of that part, but I can say add one point on sort of this being used to change, or that was mentioned that fisheries has shown great sort of adaptation in the past. So I guess I could just one point to that would be that like the change that we've seen over the last 20, 30 years or so in terms of ocean temperature in the Barents Sea has been on the order of 1 degree. That's been the warming that we've seen, and also that's the warming that if you compare like a warm decade versus a cold decade in the Barents Sea, that's also like roughly a degree, and that's what sort of previous fisheries have had to adapt to. But if you then look towards at least towards 2100, then that's the change you should expect is more on the order of 5, 6, 7 degrees. So I guess that's the question back. How can we adapt to that, or are we how are we prepared to adapt to that degree of change?
Yes, we have more questions.
Yeah, my name is Sebastian Gerland. I'm from the Norwegian Polar Institute, and I'm a geophysicist, and I work also on the Nansen Legacy project. I wondered, there was a lot in your presentations about the fisheries versus climate and climate change, but the other factors that are also developing and changing, you mentioned the changes in number of people, boats, and so on, but there could be changes about exploration of oil and gas or offshore wind, and we see much more ship presence, shipping in the region, which also affect potentially the fisheries. How do you think of that versus climate change, and is that somehow possible to be included in models?
Would you like to start, Marius? Or
It's a very difficult question, Sebastian.
Yes, it's a challenging question.
So it's that's a tough task, and I guess that one of the things that we try to do in the synthesis part or that part of the work is to at least take the information that we have about changes in the physical environment and then try to make some sort of, let's call it, expert opinion forecast on, let's say, human impact and these sort of things. But to what extent you can add that into models is hard. But I guess you could use information about models to maybe touch upon some of these things.
I think one of the challenges we see, at least from our side in the management, is that we interact a lot with the scientists from the Institute of Marine Research, and we also have a very active reading of the stock assessment from ICS. When you're at that level, in a way, if you look at the food web, what we are looking at is very much the top layer. We are looking about the fish stock and how the recruitment, as Benedicte showed in one of our files, varies from year to year. We look at growth and natural mortality and so on, but we don't really understand the processes beneath. As Benedicte told you, this recruitment of the 3 years old, they are going down. Is this natural variability, or is it a regime shift? If it is a regime shift, we need to do something. But when do we know it's a regime shift? What are the underlying processes here? And I think that is you could say there's something I would say with pollution coming from oil and gas exploration. When is it significant enough to say that this is changing something? Yeah, but that comes to the question of how much should we fish. I think your question was also how do we cope with the area, fighting between area here, because we have a lot of challenges in navigating both to have good fisheries, exploration of wind at sea and so on. So there's a lot of challenges ahead.
Thank you.
Yes, one more question behind.
Ronja Wedegärtner, WWF Global Arctic Program. I actually would like to hook into that last question and the need for management across sectors and an integrated management across sectors. And I would like to open the question up towards how much of a management do we need for biodiversity rather than just for maximum yield? Acknowledging that fish very often are very high in the food chain.
I think that is also one of the big topics coming now. One is the effect of fisheries on climate. The other one is the effect of climate on fisheries. And the third one is the effect of fisheries on marine biodiversity. I don't have an answer to your question straight out, but I think we are having a quite keen eye to evaluate how we can protect the marine biodiversity and what kind of regulatory tool we are needed to do that. Then you come into questions like marine protected areas. You come into, is that a tool maybe somewhere, or is it a tool that we try to develop the gear, fishing gear, so that it to a lesser extent touches the bottom? There are several different tools there, and I think what will happen is that we will explore these tools in the years to come and try to find something which is good both for the fishermen and the marine environment.
Just as a little question also, are you foreseeing changes in the regulation there that allows more adaptation to a changing climate or changing conditions more quickly as changes are happening more quickly?
I think we are, as I mentioned, I think we are seeing that we need to be more aware of how the climate affects fisheries. For example, one effect of the climate can be that the productivity of the fish stock will be decreased. And we need to be prepared for another productivity in the fish stocks. What is difficult for us is to assess when will this happen and when do we have to do a change. And there, to try to be prepared, I think we have to do scenario testing with various levels of productivity and try to be in good contact with the Institute of Marine Research to get the signals of when something great changes there. Yeah.
Okay, any more questions from the audience? Yes, we have a very active audience here, that's good. Over there first and then...
Thank you very much. So, my name is Anita and I come from Finnmark. And so it's great news that the fish is coming up to Finnmark. And I was wondering, because now in the fjords of Finnmark there is a lot of other activities, both planned and ongoing. Aquaculture and also dumping of mining waste into the fjords are planned. Do you think there will be disputes in the future, or that we might need to think about the spawning places now and make it ready for the future scenarios?
I don't know if I can answer your question straight out. I think there is always, when you have different needs from society, be it either mining or fisheries or aquaculture, there are contrasting opinions about what we should do. But at least there is a thorough work in the management to try to assess these things. And then you may have different opinions between what is recommended from scientists, from bureaucrats like us, and also what is decided upon politically. So this is very difficult to forecast what is going to happen.
I think we.
I was just wondering if this is something that is discussed in the management, if the preparing of spawning areas is also something you can use to management the success of the cod population.
I think we have a representative from IMR who is keen to answer here. So Maria, go.
Yeah, my name is Maria Fossem. I'm from the Institute of Marine Research, and I lead the program that is responsible for the monitoring in this area and the advice on cod. So I will say something about the spawning areas. It's interesting that you find that they will move, and we have also some indication of that, but it means that there might be some more in Finnmark and some less in Møre. It doesn't mean that the whole stock is moving away from Lofoten and this big change that some people might think, and that we don't have any indications that they will go to the Russian side. It's just that some of them could go there, but the main part will still, we believe, be in Lofoten. And I also would like to comment on another aspect that you touched upon from various points. It's the connection between climate and the cod. So for some years ago, we named the cod, the Northeast Arctic cod, a climate winner. And we were saying that this is likely because it now has a bigger area, it can spread out, it has a lot to eat, and this is really a climate winner. And we were saying that except if something happens that we're not prepared for and we move beyond this natural variability that could happen. And we were thinking then maybe problems with recruitment. And now we're seeing exactly that. We don't know yet if it's related to directly from climate, but there are some indications that it could be related to. We have two or three hypotheses that we believe could be influential, and it just shows that we can have models and we can have very good science and we can make predictions, and then with climate change, when we move outside the natural variability and we just totally change stuff, it's scary, and also we don't know where we go. So from this long comment, I would ask Per Sandberg, who is very nicely said that we need to have more scenarios and stuff, but how can we have that robustness in the science projections when we move out of anything that we know of?
Yeah, I think that's the difficult question, because as you say, you enter as scientist, you would like to build on data that you have, and what you have is historical data, and we are comfortable by using historical data to say something about the future. But when you come into a regime shift, you don't have those data, and then you have to play really with models, and it's very easy to target or to attack, for example, a prognosis based on models, which is not data-driven. But still, what I think we need to do is that when there are changes, or that we have hypotheses that there is a changing environment, even though we don't have the data, we need to simulate forward with different assumptions and be quite straightforward and clear about that. This is scenario testing. This is something which we would like to explore. What will be the consequences if this happen and if that happen and so on. But it's, I mean, until there is a clear sign then of of newly data that we are now, in fact, coming to a regime shift. For example, if the recruitment of 3 years old continue for the next 10 years to be at a low level, very low level, there is something going on which does not give good recruitment, where we could say that now we need to take action, we need to do something. The problem is that we may be too late. It's very difficult, because if you're too early, you're into very vague areas where you are basing your management on scenario testing. If you're only building on historical data, you may be too late to take action. So.
Good. And we have a couple of more questions over there. Yeah, the lady in white was first. Yes.
Right before me.
She has been raising her hand for a while.
Thanks. I'm Tian Tian. I was given presentation in the previous session about route optimization for fishing vessels, and I found this talk is very beneficial for my research. I have a few questions actually. Okay. And one is about I look at some fish stock distribution map, and I realized that those kind of maps are quite kind of is low resolution, which means that you have some prediction about fish stock for a large area, but I think that is a bit difficult for fishing for skippers to determine where they want to go for fishing. So do you have plans to make a fish stock distribution with high resolution? Yeah, that is one question.
To help the fishermen?
Yes, to help the fishermen. Yes.
No, we don't have that. I mean, what we see now is we have quite open data on satellite tracking, at least of the big fishing vessels, so where they're going. The Coastal Directorate have their AIS data. We have vessel monitoring system data. And if you look at that and you engineer a bit with those data to say, is this a vessel which is steaming, or is it a vessel which is fishing due to its speed? You can make those kind of data, those kind of maps. And we make those kind of maps, but not really for helping the fishermen to say where they should fish or where the fish is, but rather, as one of the earlier questions came in, to demonstrate this area is something which the fishermen use. And it has been used also to plan relative to building out wind farms in sea, to say that this area, in fact, is very important for fishermen. So you should be careful in putting up a windmill here.
Yeah, but do you think it could be beneficial also to do this to help the fishermen? Let's say if there's sail a shorter distance and they can go to the fishing ground, a specific location, faster, and they stay at sea for a shorter time, isn't that also environmental friendly and also like safer for the fishery industry?
I can comment on it. I think there are two different kinds of fishermen. One kind who will, they keep so much information here, and it's their secret, so they don't want to share. Because this, I know where to go. I'm not going to have a lot of boats around me. I will have all these fish for myself. That's one philosophy. The other one is, of course, that, well, I can just look at the computer, see where everybody else is, and I'll go there. And who wants to be using fuel to find the first fish? And then have everybody just coming to them. I use a lot of fuel to find the fish, and then somebody can just come and grab it. So they are... but as Per said, if you use the tools that are available, you can find quite detailed information with maybe only 24-hour delay. So it already exists, but you have to have some knowledge on how to combine different sets of official information.
Yes, thanks.
And I also think, I mean, information about where the fish is I understand the perspective that you say that there are two kind of fishermen, but if you look at this in a climate perspective, of course it is. You will use less fuel if everybody knows where the fish is, because then they will do less searching for the fish. Yeah.
And if I just can add, I think that one of the future technologies is that you are not going to use your fishing vessel to search for the fish. They are going to use smaller robot vessels that will go independently out and sort of give signals back to where the fish is, so you don't use as much fuel for searching.
Yeah, thanks. Actually, I have also one more question, because now I do this route optimization for fishing vessels, and I think it's to develop like a full working algorithm, and it involves a lot of information maps and so on. And I was, but when I look at and also you mentioned that in the fishery industry it requires more research and so on. But when I look at the Norwegian Research Council and I look at the course for proposals and so on, I don't see a course for the fishery industry, and or I just misread something, or I didn't look into something I missed, so I didn't see the course from the fishery industry. How do you think about that?
There was no
Yeah, like the course.
no research call to try to do something about the fishing industry.
Yeah, I think maybe I misunderstood or I didn't see it, but I see research course for the gas and the oil industry, maybe for the maritime industry, but there's not so much on the fishing industry, fishery.
I think there are, but of course we would like more. We would like more money going into research in our sector. We would always like that, but we have a big Institute of Marine Research, and we also have programs. We also have research which is financed by the fishermen themselves. Through something called, what's the English name, FOF?
Fisheries Research Funds.
Yeah. Thanks. That's all my questions. Thanks.
Yeah, there's a question there. Yeah.
I'm Manuel Benzi, oceanographer from Italian National Oceanographic Institute, and I have a quick question for you. Do you know if there is some regulations or initiative that can promote the collaborations between fishermen and scientists in order to stimulate them to collect opportunistic data on the fisher vessel and use that data to study the climatic changes and also the fishery stocks?
Maria, would you like to answer? You're nodding.
Yeah. Yeah, we have a big reference fleet, so we actually collect on a regular basis every year from both the ocean-going fleet and the coastal-going fleet. So there's such a system in Norway, and also I know that they have that in the US. So, and we also collaborate with NOAA, so on the American side, to develop this kind of reference fleet. Yeah, so it's a very strong collaboration in Norway with scientists and fishermen, and so we provide them with some instruments and some education, and they make these measurements of the catch in the way we want them to, and then we're given the data. It's working perfectly. Thank you.
Okay, I think we'll have one last question from there.
I'm Ingunn Bolevlid from the Research Council of Norway, so I can just add that there are calls related in this mission work program for ocean, and also in the framework program in these clusters there will be new calls now, so it's also possible to give input for future calls. And you have in the Research Council is area under pressure, arealer under press. That also will be quite huge, with a lot of cooperation between portfolios in the Research Council, You have GPI Oceans and also the Blue Economy Partnership. And I also heard today that there is an upcoming Nordic, more bottom-up call that I think also could be very convenient.
Thank you. Okay, I think we'll start wrapping up. And since this is a session organized by the Nansen Legacy, I would like to wrap up with a couple of questions related to that. The Nansen Legacy has been running for almost 6 years now, and the program has collected a lot of data, both on the physical environment and on the ecosystem. And Marius presented an outlook of the future Barents Sea. Per, would you say that the projections presented by Marius is useful for you when you are designing management strategies for the future? And do you get the information you need from a program like this?
Yes, they're very, very useful. Thank you for the question. But it's useful to get the signals of where the long-term trends are going. In order to do the management strategy evaluations, we are back to the discussion we really had previously now, that we need to do scenario testing, and there we will have to make assumptions about the recruitment, the growth, the natural mortality, but these assumptions should be based on the long-term trends, like Marius has given us here, and in that respect they are important. But we need to use them to inform our choices of how to do scenario testing, I believe. Yeah.
And one question to you, Marius. Through the Nansen Legacy, we know that the knowledge about the Barents Sea system has increased quite considerably. But are there still knowledge gaps that limits the quality of future climate projections?
Yeah, like total uncertainty being, split into, at least 3 components. One being the uncertainty just related to the models. So models are, of course, by construction, not perfect. So there's a large spread in what individual models actually show us for the future. So limiting that spread is definitely, that's the venue of very active research. And then there's, the scenario uncertainty. That's not much we can do about it, because that's a political question. And then there's internal variability. And I think within the Nansen Legacy project, we've both sort of developed models. So we've sort of contributed to narrowing that uncertainty, but we've also done quite a lot of work on understanding like natural variability in the Barents Sea. So that's what happens within the next 5 to 10 years. So that we've got a pretty good understanding of what's driving these short-term fluctuations. So I would say that there are still things to be learned, but we've come quite a good way.
Very good. I think time is running fast here, so we will wrap up this session. I think we've had a very interesting discussion, and we've had inputs from research, from management, and from industries. So that's exactly in the spirit of the Arctic Frontiers Conference. And I would like to thank the audience for some very good questions, the speakers for very good presentations, and Paul Renaud, who has arranged this side event. So thank you all, and I give the speakers a good applause.